This is Cruise Radio.
Cruise Radio is brought to you in part by tripinsurance.com. Travel insurance done right by the people who know travel insurance. Get a quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida.
This is
Cruise Radio. Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here, my friend. A review of Carnival Valor this week from Eric. A quick little cruise down the mighty Mississippi over to Cozumel and back. And as always, staff writer Richard Sims is here with Cruise News. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
Kicking things off with a story that went from bizarre to tragic on one cruise ship on the West Coast.
Yeah, there are a lot of unanswered questions surrounding this one, Doug, but here's what we know. A 35-year-old man named Michael Virgil was sailing on Royal Caribbean's Navigator of the Seas. Only an hour or two after the ship left San Pedro, the man was caught on video kicking a door with his steel-toed boots and yelling profanities and racial slurs at a crew member who basically sought shelter in one of those crew areas where they keep like the linens and stuff, basically a kind of glorified towel closet. This was all caught on film by someone else that he was apparently chasing as well, and it got on the news. But it gets even stranger because they did eventually subdue the guy. They, were able to restrain him. And then about an hour later, he died. His family members are saying both that he was an incredibly nice man and that this is not like him at all, which frankly, when you watch the video is a little bit hard to, sort of wrap your head around if it's true. But they also said that someone on the crew, while subduing him, injected him with something, and that they think that might be what caused whatever happened for him to wind up dead. The Fox News station out of Los Angeles explained the charges that the family was leveling against, I guess, the cruise line crew. It's, again, a little unclear as to exactly what happened. He is seen in the video just in a rage. I mean, it's actually quite scary to watch, and to think that, that you are on a ship with somebody who is that out of control. Some people are blaming alcohol, but it doesn't seem like that could be the case because it was so soon after the ship set sail, although he could have, as somebody pointed out, been pre-gaming. I assume that in the days and weeks to come, we will probably learn a little bit more about this as the investigation gets underway and autopsy is done, that kind of thing. But just tragic. And unfortunately, his wife and son were on the cruise at the same time. So they were subjected to this, as was everyone else on board. Just a very sad and strange story, quite frankly.
And a former crew member has gone viral thanks to making a suggestion that, well, at least one cruise line has already shot down.
I think it's safe to say that most cruisers know exactly how hard the crew works, whether it's the housekeeping staff or bartenders or people working behind the scenes. And usually the controversy comes in when people talk about tipping and removing their tips. But in this case, a former crew member named Renel Bonda posted a video. He's kind of an influencer now, and he posted a video suggesting that the cruise lines should give each of their crew members one full day off a month. He said this would go a long way toward helping their mental health and helping keep them, productive. It would increase productivity, and it would ultimately lead to a, more satisfying experience for cruise line passengers. Because, we've all been on ships where you can tell that, like, maybe a big part of the crew is towards the end of their contract and they just don't want to be there. Or they're just, they feel overworked and they don't have that, the pep in the step that we usually come to associate with the crew. Unfortunately, it seems like this is not something that's going to happen, at least not with Carnival Cruise Line, because when somebody suggested this to their brand ambassador, John Heald, he essentially said it wasn't possible. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We cannot give them," it's a little, his sometimes he does not use the best word choices, but here's what he said. He said, quote, "We cannot give them one for 24 hours off. This would severely impact the guest service. We are not like a hotel who can bring in extra crew members. So he's basically saying we have a finite number of people on this ship. We have a finite number of crew. And if we were to do sort of a rotational thing where everybody gets a day off every month, that would be a large portion of the crew who is off and unable to tend to the needs of the guests. I don't know how I feel about that response. I don't think it's a lot to ask for people to have one day off a month, frankly. And while I realize that that does mean that some changes would have to be made and some organizational shifts would have to be made, and maybe you would have to hire some extra crew, but it does seem like, these people work incredibly hard for salaries that you and I would definitely not take these jobs. So to me, it seems as if maybe there is something here, and maybe there is something that can be done to sort of lessen the burden on these folks who work so hard to give us such a good cruise vacation.
Carnival Corporation is making some big changes that involves Carnival Cruise Line.
Yeah, I've never sailed from Australia. I've become much more aware of the market, though, thanks to some of the cruise bloggers I follow, including Adrian, who's better known as the Cruise and Travel Guy. He has been very critical of some of the changes that have been made in the Australian market recently, and it's provided some really cool insight. In this case, P&O is shifting two of their ships over to the Carnival Cruise Line fleet. Now, P&O is part of Carnival Corporate, and they are basically shifting two ships over. They will be now known as the Carnival Adventure and the Carnival Explorer, and they'll become sort of an amalgamation of the best of both lines. This is sort of along the same lines as when Carnival Corporation moved two of their Costa ships over to Carnival Cruise Line fleet and marketed them as Carnival Fun Italian style. But this is going to be kind of interesting to watch in the next year or so, because the Australian market has become incredibly difficult, due in part to its relatively low share of the cruise market and its high operating costs. So, this feels almost like shuffling deck chairs around on the Titanic, because if the market is so difficult, is it really going to make that big a difference, what you are calling the ships or what amenities you are adding? Does the Carnival name have such a good reputation that, maybe they think that they can get a bigger share of the market with the name Carnival than P&O? I don't really know that this move, it makes a lot of sense to me, but with the market in Australia being so difficult, it's fun to watch the various cruise lines try and figure out ways to get the best share of it that they possibly can.
Shifting now to the Bahamas, where a yacht and a cruise ship had a little bit of a fender bender.
The Allure of the Seas was docked in Nassau, and a yacht named My Aurora wound up doing sort of a slow crash into the side of the Royal Caribbean ship. Nobody was injured that we know of, and the smaller ship sustained some damage to its mast and communication system. Of course, because we live in a world where everything is caught on camera, there is footage of the collision. It's unclear exactly what happened, but it reminded me of an early episode of Bob's Burgers. There was a scene on that where Bob's daughter, Tina, is driving in an empty parking lot. It's a huge empty parking lot with just one car there. And she slowly but surely starts heading for that car. And her father, sitting in the passenger seat, is like, Tina, turn away, turn away. And it seems like the most, avoidable thing in the world. And yet she hits that car. When you watch the video of this yacht collision, it's sort of the same thing. You can see the yacht coming, and it's like, it's heading for a very big ship. It's like, okay, I'm sure you're going to turn. I'm sure. Yep. Oh, nope. No, you're not. And they hit. So, I don't imagine that much damage at all was done to the cruise ship. In fact, some people on board didn't even feel it. Some people said it felt a little bit like they hit a wave, but most people were completely unaware that it even happened. Whereas the yacht, like I said, sustained a bit of damage, as one will when you run into something much, much bigger than yourself.
And we have another update on that port fee that Mexico is planning to charge cruise passengers beginning next summer.
So regular listeners will recall us telling you over the last couple of weeks about a proposed $42 per person non-residence tax that's going to be charged for every cruise guest. It was originally slated to begin in January of 2025, but then it was pushed back 6 months to July of 2025. We now have new information courtesy of the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. They did an interview with Sea Trade News during which they said that there was at least a little bit of good news regarding this tax, which is this. You will only be charged that tax once per cruise. In other words, if you're doing a sailing which stops at multiple ports in Mexico, you won't be charged at each stop. It's still $42 a person, which is not cheap. But at least if you are doing a bunch of stops in Mexico, you won't have to pay it at every one of those. You only have to pay it at one. There's still some details to be worked out exactly as far as how it's going to be processed and, which of the ports claims it. I'm assuming it'll be the first one and how they divide it and all that. But that's their problem. For now, what we do know is that this is still supposed to go into effect as of July.
And I'm very curious how you feel about this next story, because I know you're a big NCL fan. It looks like they're making some changes to two ships.
Yeah, both the Bliss and the Breakaway will be going into dry docks next year. Bliss will be first in January, and then I believe it's March. The Breakaway will go in. And they're both going to have some pretty significant changes made to them. On Bliss, they're adding something called Horizon Park, which is a new outdoor venue where they'll have games like cornhole, which always makes me laugh, giant Jenga. There'll be places to relax, stuff like that. They're also going to be upgrading the staterooms. They're going to replace Los Lobos with Cagney's. They're going to replace Coco's, which never really caught on all that much. That was the sort of very fun but expensive ice cream shop. That's being replaced by a teppanyaki. And Ocean Blue will be replaced by Palomar, which is a Mediterranean restaurant that I believe was introduced on Prima, if I'm not mistaken. And I had the chance to eat there, and it was an amazing, amazing restaurant. So really looking forward to that. They're also going to make a bunch of changes around the ship. It'll then do a 13-day repositioning cruise from Southampton to Miami on February 2nd. And from there, it'll start doing Caribbean sailings and to the Mexican Riviera. As for Bliss, Breakaway, which was one of the first ships I ever sailed on. So I'm kind of excited to see the changes they're making here. They are launching something called the Silver Screen Bistro, which is going to replace the Spiegel tent. And it'll be kind of a combination of cinema and dining, which is interesting because Norwegian has made a lot of changes in their entertainment roster. And this sounds like a way to, because before they had live shows in the Spiegel tent. So this sounds like a way to sort of cut back on live entertainment and focus more on, if you're doing cinema, it's something that you can, like a movie or whatever, that you can use over and over again. They're also going to be doing a handheld menu in the Silver Screen Bistro, which with food that's inspired by Food Republic, which is their really great shareable plate Asian fusion restaurant on a lot of the Norwegian ships. They are also going to add that Horizon Park, which we were talking about with the Bliss, and something called the Stadium, which is described as complimentary outdoor activity space offering family-friendly games modeled after the Prima class ship. So again, they are taking things. We talk about this a lot, how as they move forward with new ships, they learn things and they find out what people are loving, and they try and incorporate it either into ships moving forward, or in this case, ships that are already out there. They're also going to expand the Vibe Beach Club, which is one of my favorite places, to have additional seating and cabanas. And the Haven Sun Deck, which is, of course, their ship within a ship concept. The one on Bliss is nice. On Breakaway is nice, but I like the idea of expanding it and enhancing it to be a little more in keeping with some of the more modern ships in the fleet. Its dry dock will take place this is the Norwegian Breakaway, from February 19th to March 14th, and then it will go back into service. So some kind of fairly big changes for these dry docks.
And the question of the week comes from Scott. Email yours, doug@cruiseradio.net. He says, looking for clarification on Norwegian Cruise Line's Cruise Next program. So Scott actually had a few questions, including whether or not the onboard credit one receives when purchasing the Cruise Next certificate can be used in the future, as well as whether their certificate themselves can be transferred to someone else.
Yeah, Scott had a bunch of questions, and I actually reached out to him privately to sort of walk through it and answer his questions. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview here of how the program works and why some people wind up getting a little confused. The CruiseNets program is basically the program, and almost every cruise line offers it, but we're speaking specifically about Norwegian here, in which while you are on board the ship, they are encouraging you to book a future cruise. In order to do that, they offer this deal. It can vary from, depending on what time of year you're sailing or what kind of specials they're running. But let's say you buy a $250 future cruise deposit for $150, and then you get $100 of onboard credit. Now, where Scott got a little bit confused was he kind of thought that credit could be used on a future cruise, which it cannot. It can only be used on the cruise that you are on when you purchase the certificate. The good news is he also wanted to know, because he had bought, 4 or 5 of them, you can usually only use one at a time. It's good for one deposit on a future cruise. Sometimes when they're having specials, you can use 2. I believe on the Black Friday sales, they actually allowed you to use 3 if you happen to have 3, which is kind of incredible. But the one thing that he wanted to know as well was whether those could be transferred from one person to another. And they definitely can be. You and I have done that when one of us is on a cruise and the other might have something planned, but they haven't booked it yet. You'll pick up a cruise certificate, transfer it to me, and then I can use it and get that extra added value there while you still get to enjoy the onboard credit. So they definitely can be transferred from one person to another. The thing you want to do when you're purchasing, whether through Norwegian or, any other line that offers this type of thing, is really make sure you understand what you're paying, what it's good for, how much you can use it, how far down the line you can use it, because they usually have an expiration date attached, and whether it's transferable. It can be very confusing, and it's, especially if you're on a ship and there's lots going on and maybe you've had a couple drinks and you're like, hey, I'm going to buy a future cruise credit. And you don't really pay attention to what the rules are. So it's a great deal, especially if you are someone who plans on booking cruises down the line, and you don't have to pick the cruise you're doing while you're on there. You are just basically giving them money saying, I'm going to make a future cruise. I'm going to make a reservation down the line once I get home. You do not have to make that decision right then. You can make it within the restrictions, within the time restriction. Usually it's about 2 years, I want to say, that the certificates are good for. They're a great deal for regular cruisers, but just make sure you understand exactly what you're getting and what the details are.
Good to know. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, thank you. Merry Christmas, my friend.
And to you, my friend.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
Just back from a cruise? Let's talk about it. Email Doug@cruiseradio.net.
Eric just returned from a 4-night cruise out of New Orleans on the Carnival Valor, and he joins us on the line to talk about it. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, Doug. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, last time we talked about your cruise on Carnival Breeze, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, we did Father's Day weekend out of Galveston through some pretty choppy waters.
This one's a little bit closer to home for you since you live in Louisiana. What made you want to take this one down the Mississippi?
Only just a couple of nights after we got back off of the one in June, we decided to book this one. We did things a little differently this time. We did leave our daughter at home with the grandparents. So while we were living the high life on the cruise ship, she was living the high life with the grandparents. But we've not sailed out of New Orleans since 2019. We did a couple out of there. And for no other reason than we just wanted to try, other ports. But We chose New Orleans this time solely based on convenience. And of course, the price was pretty good. And we'll get to that a little later. But this one just fit well into the schedule. I'm a public school teacher, so usually our vacations go around the holidays that I get off. My wife's got a pretty flexible schedule at her work. But we were able to do this one the weekend before Thanksgiving. So we both only had to take a couple of days off. But we decided to give New Orleans a try once more.
Where you live in Louisiana, do you do a pre-night in the Big Easy, or do you drive in day of?
Yeah, so we I always talk about that whenever we plan these trips, because any other port, we would always do the night before. But we can get from my doorstep to the port parking garage in exactly 1 hour.
Okay.
As long as there's no traffic. We did leave a little bit early because if you're familiar with the area at all, and any of my South Louisiana people understand, don't go by the airport between the hours of 7 and 8:30, because you're just going to be sitting there watching the planes come in and go, because the traffic is horrendous. But we were able to go through there at just the right time with zero issues with traffic. And not too long before we took the sailing, about 2 months before, one of my wife's retired coworkers, her and her husband, decided to come with us. So it was 4 of us making the journey down there. But thankfully, traffic was not a problem. We decided to try that one.
All right. So you make your way down to the Port of New Orleans. You park the vehicle in the garage. You walk over to the terminal. So first question, how long did it take you from the curb to the ship?
So this process was so smooth. This is where we were kind of reluctant, because a few years ago when we sailed out of New Orleans, it felt like all we did was wait in lines. Could have had something to do with the time that we picked for check-in. We had the second group for check-in time. So the only ones that were in front of us were your diamond, platinum, and your suites. We're not quite to that level yet, but we're getting there. But if you've ever sailed out of New Orleans, you know how easy the parking situation is. You drive straight into the garage, pay for it right there. Someone meets you with your luggage, and I'll do a side note and say, make sure to tip them. It helps. And the porter that took our luggage, we gave him a really good tip, and he said, okay, I've got a special parking spot for y'all. And I thought he was just pulling our leg. But later on, when we talk about debarkation, I'll talk about how that came in handy. But once we parked, we walked to the elevator, brings us down to the ground floor. We begin to check in. I'm going to subtract some time, because there was a period of time where we did just have to sit and wait, but it was after we had already checked in. We were ready. They were just waiting to basically clear the ship and get some things done. Our total moving time and time on the ship, I would say less than 20 minutes.
Okay.
Now we did have to sit and wait for probably 15 or 20, but it wasn't because anything, there were no delays. It's just because we got there at 10:30 was our check-in time. No, I'm sorry. 10 o'clock was our check-in time. We got there at 10 o'clock. We were in our seats by 10:15, and then we were stepping on the ship by 10:40.
Wow.
We were so surprised, but I think the early check-in time kind of helped with that, because as we were, the way that the terminal is, you kind of snake back and forth. So even though you're at the end of the line, at the end of the check-in process, you can still kind of look back and see people coming in, and it was a madhouse out there. So, if we ever do New Orleans again, we will definitely be sticking with the earliest check-in time possible.
Sounds like they cleared the ship pretty fast, though. You got to start boarding at that time, right?
They did, and I'm not sure I really don't know why, but they did, because I think, we were sitting down, people were still coming off at 10:15, and at 10:30 they made the announcement, said, hey, we're going to do first boarding at 10:40. So it's like, wow, okay, this was a quick one. So yeah, I guess that just means that the people on the previous cruise just had their stuff together and got out of there.
Yeah, interesting. So you make your way on board Valor. What were your first impressions?
The only ships that we have sailed up to this point had been the Dream class ships, and this was our first time stepping foot on a Conquest class. And it was gorgeous. I was kind of trying to make mental notes of looking for blemishes and this and that, but it was an absolutely gorgeous ship. Now you can tell that it was made, it was built in the early 2000s, because it still has a lot of that I guess people would call it gaudy decorations, but it was absolutely gorgeous. And you walk in you look up, you look at the atrium all the way up, and the atrium lobby on this one was, really, really neat. It's got all the, presidents' faces kind of embossed in the different levels. You got your eagles everywhere, all the lights, the marble, the granite. It was gorgeous. We really come to enjoy this ship. It was nice. But walking on, like I said, it was clean, was not crowded to start with because we were some of the first ones on the ship. And we went ahead and just went straight over to, you walk in on deck 3, and our muster station was on the starboard side of deck 4. Went up, walked right out. And they scanned our thing and gave us the instructions on how to do the muster drill, and that was pretty much it. Now, something that we did, and I think this will fit right here, something we did differently this time, and you you may even frown on this. So we walked on the ship with nothing except what was in our pockets. And my wife had these little fanny packs for us where we just kept our documents, my wallet, some cash, the car key. That was it. Everything else that we needed for the entire cruise, we fit into one suitcase, and we checked it with the porter. But I'm going to tell you that it literally transformed the first day of our cruise, because the couple that was with us did the same thing. The lady had her purse with a couple things, and that was it. So we didn't have to worry about keeping up with anything the whole first half of the day. As opposed to some of the other folks, carrying around 4 and 5 suitcases and 4 6-packs of drinks and everything on the first day. And I think, our next one, whenever we bring our daughter, it'll be a little bit different. But if we do, just us adults, that's how we're going to do it from now on. Because we've never, knock on wood, we've never had an issue with, Carnival, losing our luggage or anything like that.
I'm trying to think, as you're walking on this ship, on this Conquest class, is there a center atrium bar, or is it more tucked away under that staircase?
When you walk in from the gangway, you're walking in, and the first thing you see is the atrium bar, but it does sit at the base of the steps. So basically, like if you're at the atrium bar, and you're looking, towards where they're serving, behind it is the steps.
Gotcha.
So it's weird because I know this is a little bit smaller ship than the Dream class, but the lobby just felt like it had so much more room in it. If I remember correctly, I think on the Dream class, the stage where they do the trivia and performing and all that, that's usually kind of up above where the atrium bar is.
Yep.
Which is basically between the staircase and the bar. So if you're wanting to sit there and enjoy some music or watch something, then you kind of have to look up. But here in this atrium, the small stage was directly in front of where the elevators were. So it was a surprisingly really nice layout, which was great because we spent a significant amount of time in the atrium just doing all the various trivia and entertainment. Of course, we'll get to that a little later.
Yeah. So what kind of stateroom did you book for this cruise, and what did you think of it throughout your sailing?
So we've become really big fans of the interior staterooms. I've heard you say multiple times before about good midday naps, and that is the truth. And so this time we tried something different. Usually we stay on deck 7 on the Dream class, which in this case would have ended up being kind of, deck 6, the equivalent. But we decided to get crazy and stay on the Lido deck this time. Now, if, again, the adults only cruise, we would do this again and again and again, because being right down the hallway from everything that we wanted to go to was phenomenal. The only time we had to get on an elevator was to either go to the lobby or go to the dining room. So that was super nice. But when we walked in, it's a typical interior stateroom. Everything was clean. We had to chuckle a little bit though, and as I said about the decorations in the lobby, you could tell that this was a little bit older ship, because on this one, all of the molding going around the room was like a pink salmon color. So it was, I don't want to say it was dated because, it's current for when it was built. But you can tell it's an older ship. But again, typical interior stateroom, everything was perfectly in place. We did notice that on the little end tables by the beds, the lamps did have USB plugs in them, but they're not USB-C plugs. And of course, all of our stuff now takes USB-C. So that didn't help us too much, but we made a mental note for if we ever do come back on it.
Since you were staying on the Lido deck, these ships, well, mostly all ships that have Lido deck, staterooms have a problem of the vortex. When the pool door opens, it sucks the air out. Did you have that?
Well, I was kind of critical about people with this to start with, because we're in a lot of Facebook groups when it comes to cruising. Mm-hmm. And this was like the number one question that people had about this ship was, how was the air conditioning in room number so-and-so? How was it this? And I was like, I was thinking back to the Dream and the Breeze where you could hang meat in those rooms. Well, I'm not sure if it was just this level or if it's just because it's an older ship or what, but it was not as cool as what we were used to. And I'm sure that being on the Lido deck had something to do with that. Whenever you leave the room and go towards the Lido deck, you do have to snake through a pretty good bit of hallways. Mm-hmm. And, they've got the automatic glass door that opens and closes, which obviously it's a high traffic area. But even the first night, whenever we were still coming out of the river and whenever we left New Orleans, it was 46, 47 degrees.
Wow.
It was cold. It was hilarious because everybody was at the sail away party with, sweaters and jackets. And, we're not used to seeing that
right.
cruise. But even that first night, it was still warmer than what we were used to. Never uncomfortable, mm-hmm. but we kept the AC maxed out the whole time. And then staying at the front of the ship was really a pleasure for this too, because there was not a lot of foot traffic. We were almost at the very front. It was, I think, 2 more staterooms in front of us, and then you had the front of the ship. So that was kind of another mental note that we made about, okay, if you stay towards the front, there should not be a whole lot of back and forth of foot traffic.
When you're staying on deck 9, like, could you walk out to the front of the ship and, overlook the bow?
You have to go down to 7.
Okay.
So the bridge is on 8. So right. This one, like on the Dream and the Breeze, you can go to 10, I think, and that's right above the bridge. On this one, you go down to 7, and you can walk to the front, go there, and then you go down one more to 6. And you're a little closer to the front. And I actually spent a pretty significant amount of time out there because and we'll talk about that on Sea Days. But that's there. And I don't know if anybody ever knows about it because of all the cruises that I've been on, I've never been out there and somebody else was out there at the same time. So it's a pretty nice little secret. And especially on the Valor, there was at least 5 or 6 benches out there that you could sit on and just enjoy it. It was super quiet.
Yeah, it's one of those hidden gems, certainly. Let's talk about the food on board Carnival Valor. We'll start at the top at the Lido Marketplace, or I should say start on your deck since you were on Lido deck. How was the food there and the crowds and congestion in the buffet?
So we got to experience this in several different aspects because we got on the ship early. So we were able to, number one, go straight to Guy's Burger because that was about the only time you could get one. And then we were able to enjoy the Lido deck when there was not a lot of people in there. Now, there was never a time on this entire cruise where we struggled to find seating. And I think that area is called Rosie's Diner on this one. Mm-hmm. And I think the weather had a lot to do with it. The weather for this cruise was absolutely perfect. Now, the first day, whenever we were leaving New Orleans that night, and then even the next morning was still a little cool. But once we got to lunchtime on that first sea day, it was like, picture perfect weather that somebody ordered. It was great. But even in the evening time, lunch rush, seating was not a problem. Now, some of the lines got a little bit long depending on what you were wanting to go for. We spent usually lunchtime or maybe even a later lunch, we would go to the Lido just to grab a couple of things. We never really did eat big lunch. But of course, the Mongolian walk always had a line. I think the other gentleman that was in our group, he got at one time. My wife and I frequented the deli several times, mm-hmm. and that was I don't know if you've ever had the Reuben sandwich from one of the delis, the ships. That was so mm-hmm. good, and they've got this. I wish I could have got a case of this. It was truffle aioli.
Okay.
That's man, it was like I could have just drank that stuff. And I'm not ashamed to say that I got back to back 2 Reubens because I sat down and ate one, and then my wife Paige went to go get something else, and I said, "Hey, give me another Reuben if the line's not long." And that was really, really good. We were pleased with that. I'm trying to think of anything else on the Lido. Oh, so and kind of a maybe not so well known secret. So the Lido on this one, the Rosie's Diner, is deck 9, but on this ship, if you go to deck 10, on right above the Lido market with a Rosie's Diner, there's a barbecue restaurant up there. It's not Guy's Pig and Anchor. It's just called barbecue. Old fashioned barbecue, I think, is the name of it. We did check it out the first day. It was good. I mean, it wasn't the best we'd ever had, but it was good. And that's another good place to find some seating, because even during lunch rush, there really was not a lot of people up there. Now, if this would have been, a bad weather day or something, I'm sure it would have been packed, because this sailing, I think, was like 105% booked or something like that, with 900 children at that.
You sound like you had a little good run there with the Lido Marketplace and upstairs at the knockoff Guys old-fashioned barbecue, I guess you're calling it. And then how about the outside deck, the Guys barbecue and the Blue Iguana tequila, or not tequila, well, that too, or the, what is it called? The Blue Iguana Cantina.
The Cantina, yeah. So we were able to sneak in a couple of Guys burgers here and there, because most of the time we would eat a late lunch. For no other reason than that's just what we wanted to do. The burgers were great, as always. The Cantina, I think I got breakfast there on the very last day with, I'm pretty sure that's the only time that we used that. But there was always a line at both of them. There were always lines at both of them, because I think I know for a fact there were a lot of first-time cruisers on this, because my wife and I kind of, not to sound like we're better than anyone, because we're not, but we make it a point to, okay, how many blue cards did we see? And we think back and reminisce on the days of our first Carnival cruises here. But there were a lot of first-time cruisers. And I think that had a lot to do with why the lines at those 2 restaurants were the longest, because when you walk out on the Lido, that's the first 2 things you see. And if you're not familiar with it, then you might think that that's your only choices. So those poor folks, they never got a break.
Yeah.
It was nonstop with them. And then, of course, both of the Red Frog, the rum place, and then the Blue Iguana tequila. It's like, we wanted to just go walk up and get a couple Cokes or something. It's like we almost had to wait in line for that. So it was extremely crowded in the main pool deck, which we'll talk a little bit about on sea days. We did find a better alternative to if we didn't want to sit in the pool. We'll get to that when we get to sea days.
Did y'all do the steakhouse this time?
We did not do the steakhouse. We didn't do any specialty dining on this one, but they did have it. I walked up there just to look at it, just to lay eyes on it. They were trying to run some pretty significant promotions. I didn't realize that they would do that, but I think they have the standard, if you book the steakhouse the first night, they give you something free. But apparently there weren't a lot of people using the steakhouse on this one. They would come find you. They had people that were sent out, some crew members with their little clipboard trying to find people to dine in the steakhouse, and they were offering extra appetizers or a whole nother main course or something just to get people in there. So that tells me there weren't a lot. And then the chef's table also. I mean, as soon as we walked on the ship, they had people trying to come and getting us to book, the chef's table, offering significant discounts. So I'm not too sure that any of the specialty dining did too well on this cruise for anybody, really.
Wow. Okay. So how about the entertainment, and how did it stack up on your cruise a few months back on Carnival Breeze?
Yeah. So, the last cruise, we weren't able to spend a whole lot of time in the theaters because our Tyler doesn't sit still very long, nor do we expect her to. But we were able to soak up a lot of the entertainment on this ship. We went to pretty much all of the comedy shows. We went to all of the playlist productions. And I think we were able to actually somehow squeeze in listening to all of the live entertainment sprinkled throughout the ship. They had the string trio that would play in the atrium. They had a guy that would play guitar and kind of do requests. And he was in a couple of different places. There was a country group too. And this ship has a lot of places for people to perform because they'll do live music in the Red Frog. They've got a stage kind of off to the side where the casino is. And then they have the stage in the atrium lobby too. And so at any given point, there's three of those things going. The comedy was great. We were a little worried the first night because the line for the comedy club. So, the comedy club, the Eagles Lounge is in the back of the ship on deck 5. And the line the first night stretched all the way through the casino, all the way out into the lobby, almost to the front theater. So literally the length of the ship was the line for the comedy club. And I'm thinking there is no way on earth we're going to get in to see this. And I'm going to tell you, the Eagles Lounge on this boat is huge because everybody got in there and there were still seats left over. So that was really neat. And we did go to, like I said, we went to all the comedy ones. The rated R was maybe a little too much for our taste, but the same guys, whenever they did the PG, like we were hurting. We were laughing so hard. It was phenomenal. So overall, the entertainment was great. And the hosts around the entertainment was really good.
Yeah, that's a talent if you're able to make people laugh in a PG show,
Yeah, they were really receptive to it. I forget the name of the guys. I should have wrote that down, but one of them had done some stuff on CMT.
Oh, cool.
And again, there were a lot of children, and I think that they were prepared for that. But it was hilarious. We were glad we were able to go to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, because the line was pretty long, I'll ask you about, you said it was wrapping back down to, or snaking back down to the casino. How was the smoke situation in and around it?
We were so pleasantly surprised compared to all of our previous cruises. The smoke was pretty much non-existent. Nice. I'm thinking it could have just been the demographic of the people that were on. Like I said, there were the announcer, as we were boarding, told us there were over 900 children. So that tells me lots of families, lots of young families. But the casino was full every time we walked by, but we never smelled smoke. Now, the difference on this ship compared to like a Dream class, on the Breeze of the Dream, you're walking through the center of the casino. Well, on this one, not necessarily. You're walking kind of on the promenade is on the port side of the ship. And the casino is kind of off to the side. So, you're walking right past it, but you're not necessarily walking straight through it. So that may have helped some, but we really didn't notice it because, on our previous cruises, like that last one we did on the Breeze, you smelled it when you walked on the ship.
Yeah.
But not an issue at all this time. How
were the sea days as far as crowds and congestion?
Yeah, really no complaints, unless we were trying to do something on the Lido deck. It was interesting because, like I said, lots of first time cruisers. And I think that maybe that's just where they gravitated to. That's where they wanted to be, because if on a sea day, if you wanted to sit somewhere on the main Lido, like where the pool and everything is, that was impossible. Even though, this ship has an interesting layout for that because it's kind of got, I'll call it that stadium seating, because the pool deck on this one is kind of 10, 11, and part of 12, because as you're walking back towards the front of the ship, it steps up. So all of your, the advantage is if you do get a chair, there's not really going to be anybody directly in front of you blocking your view because it's just a ledge and then it goes down to the next one. But it was extremely crowded, extremely crazy. We've been on several. I think this was cruise number 6 or 7. We've never, ever seen the security team in action before. We saw the security team 3 times on this cruise.
Oh, what kind of action are you talking about?
Well, the first one was within 2 hours of us getting on the ship. And apparently, and it's never, a lot of times it's never the kids. It's the adults. In this case, it was the adults. One lady had moved somebody else's stuff and it started getting heated. So right away, security team comes out. Second time, somebody was getting a little bit too crazy on top of the I forget which one it is. It must have been the Red Frog rum bar. This guy was breaking it down on top of the bar. It was pretty comical. But then the most eventful one, I was headed back to our room, and as I mentioned, we stayed on the Lido deck. And I walk through. And so if you're on deck 9 and you're walking back towards the staterooms, you go through the glass door and then you kind of go around the elevators. And the main entrance to the Lido deck staterooms is kind of on the left. So you turn in, but then if you look back to your left, there's about 5 or 6 more staterooms that are kind of even with the elevators all the way back to where the pool deck starts.
Yeah.
So I'm walking towards my room and I hear this commotion behind me. And so I turn around and I see it's some guys that are beating on the stateroom door and just yelling. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to get my sunglasses. And so I get up there to my room, which is all the way on the other end. And I'm kind of looking back, trying to see what's going on. And all of a sudden I see this, I guess he's a senior officer because he had a white shirt with the black stripes on his shoulders. He's got his phone and he comes out of nowhere and he says, no, I need y'all here now. And I'm telling you, it was like something from a James Bond movie. These little doors opened up in the hallway. And I'm telling you, 5 or 6 of these security guards came out. They grabbed these people and we never saw them for the rest of the cruise.
Oh,
it was shocking because we'd never witnessed something like that on a cruise before.
Man, never a dull moment, I guess. Wow.
Oh,
So on this 4-night cruise, was it just one port?
It was just one port. We did Cozumel. We are been to Cozumel plenty enough times where we are comfortable enough to not have to do an excursion. It was 4 of us in this group, myself, my wife, and then a friend of hers and her husband. And he decided that he didn't want to get off the boat. He wanted to just stay on the boat. So the 3 of us just got off. We walked, did all of the typical up and down the streets, shopping. We didn't go too far because we just didn't feel like getting hassled for everything. And then we found, I think it's called Poncho's Backyard. If you walk out of the port, like the main shopping center, you take a left and we just kept walking till we found something. Beautiful little place, quiet as could be. There's not really a beach right there, but you're on the water and you can watch the boats. You can watch people coming in from the port. We had some guacamole, some other things to eat, and it was a really, really nice, quiet experience. And to be as close as we were, because we were, I don't know, a 3-minute walk from the main shopping center on the port. So it was a nice surprise. Now I think we could hear behind us some of the other places that people usually go. It was really loud and everything, but where we were was super quiet. The folks there were super generous, welcoming. They were glad to see us. And it was really nice because we thought that people would just walk up and sit and then all these people would be coming. But if you sit, they make you, they're like, no, you're sitting at our restaurant. You have to buy something from us.
Right.
So, which we were fine with because we didn't spend much money on shopping and we didn't spend money on excursions. So a couple $dollars for some guacamole and other stuff was well worth it. It was wonderful.
So Poncho's Backyard, that was, I hope I don't get anyone in trouble by saying this. This is before the shutdown. This was 2018, I guess, maybe 2019. I went over there, kind of tucked away, and I was trying to fly my drone, and a security guy from Poncho's came out there and told me I couldn't do it. I paid him a couple of 20s and he turned his back and he let me get some shots. I'm so glad he did, man, because the next year was the shutdown and I got some great photos of Carnival Fantasy, which was the first ship to be sold. So very blessed he let me pay him off to fly the drone there because it actually worked out for all of us.
Of course. Yeah, that's about the same significance. A friend of mine was able to go on the last sailing and they did like this whole, it was almost like a funeral service to where the captain was thanking everybody, the cruise director was thanking everybody. They said, okay, we're going to sound the horn for the very last time. And that's really cool. I'm glad you got to do that.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. So you make your way back on the ship, or actually was Poncho's, then you went back on the ship, or did you do anything else there?
Yeah, so after we left Poncho's, we just walked through a couple of shopping centers, picked up some souvenirs and got back on the ship. We were back on the ship by, I want to say 12 o'clock. We got to enjoy the port, but we also got to enjoy the ship almost, exclusively on our own because when you go to Cozumel, everybody gets off the ship.
Sure.
When we got back on early enough to where people were still at their excursions or they were still at some of those other places. And we really, really enjoyed that. Now, we didn't do any eating or anything when we got back on, obviously, but just enjoying the ship, quietly like that. It was super nice. And then, closer to 4 o'clock, 4:30, we we got out there on deck 4 and we're waiting for the pier runners, and they had one. I mean, he was down to the last minute. And it's funny because we could actually hear the music. They were playing music up on the main deck. I forget the name of the song, but it was to try to make him run faster. And a couple of the folks went out there like, hey, we need to go. It's time to go. So I'm surprised that they were, that lenient with him, because they were pretty strict about it. But one of the interesting things, and I thought about this, you mentioned in the dock, I got up early that morning because I'm an early riser. Got up that morning and we were coming into Cozumel really early. We weren't supposed to get off the ship until 8:00, but it was like 6:30 and we were pulling up to the dock, but we were backing into the dock. So, the dock was on the port side and the dock was on the starboard side. So we're backing in and we get really close, and I'm watching over the edge, and the port workers are standing there ready to receive the ropes. Then all of a sudden we take off and we go back out, at least, we're probably a mile back out there, and then turned around and then went into the port facing forward. And I don't know why. I'm not sure what the reason was. Even the port workers were kind of surprised whenever the boat started to pull away. And I asked a couple of people, crew members, and they really didn't know. They didn't realize it. So I'm not sure why. I don't know what the deal was. And it wasn't windy or anything, because at first I was thinking maybe the wind had something to do with it, but I'm not sure. But that was that was an interesting way to start the day.
Yeah. You make your way, I guess you have a sea day, and then you make your way up to Mississippi the night before you get off the ship. What time do you start approaching? Is it like around dinner time to Mississippi?
No, it's pretty late. I think we were coming into the mouth right around 10:30, because we did, we opted for the late dinner this time. And so we finished dinner, went to the show the last night, and then we were sitting in the lobby. So yeah, it was probably 10:30 at least when we were finally getting into the river. Usually about 8:30, 9:00, you start to see some of the offshore oil platforms, so you're getting close.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably at least 10:30.
Yeah, you start seeing those oil rigs, and then a few hours later, or a couple hours later, you start. Oh, I got cell signal.
Yeah.
I'm good to go. We're almost there.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's almost like an epidemic, because you'll see people like they'll start grabbing their phones and stuff, and we had already talked to my parents that day at lunchtime. And we didn't get the Wi-Fi. I just had the add-on from AT&T to where I could just make calls. It's something new they started doing through the cruise ships. But anyway, so I was like, nope, not turning them on until tomorrow. So that was kind of a nice luxury.
Yeah, for sure. You make your way to the dock there in New Orleans. How was the debark process?
Yeah, debark was a little more chaotic on the New Orleans side. Nothing wrong with the Carnival side. If you don't know what you're doing debark morning, it's because you didn't follow the instructions. and I say that, because I'm a middle school teacher, so it's like half of my day is just, hey, did y'all follow the instructions? Because they do everything through the app. If you're not comfortable with the app, they can set you up at guest services. So the Carnival side of it was easy. And we actually purposely picked the latest time so that we could get our money's worth out of the ship. Had breakfast when it was our time. We went straight down, and they kind of funneled us right out, scanned us. We were good. Going through the gangway was not a problem. The problem was when we got towards the end of our process. In New Orleans, there's escalators, and so we're going down this escalator, and apparently and I'm not sure if they work for Carnival or if they work for the port, but they all wear Carnival tags. But this lady was there at the bottom, and apparently she was having a bad day, because there was a porter with a cart full of luggage that was trying to get through, and she wouldn't let him through. I don't know why. And so what happened was it started to cause backup. And the next thing you know, here we are coming down the escalator, and there's nowhere for us to step off because people are crowded in front. So I had to activate my teacher voice and tell people to move, because we were about to have a pretty messy situation. And then once we got past that, we went and did final checkout and customs and everything. And then as we're walking back towards the elevators, the group of people in front of us, they go left to go out the door to get picked up. Well, it's been a while since we've been, so my wife was just following them, and she literally puts one foot out of the door And I said, hey, no, we got to go this way. And so she just turns around to come back in. And we were convinced that the lady was going to like stop her. She's like, no, you can't come back in here. We're like, she didn't leave. She's like, no, you can't, no reentry. And I'm like, man, we just got cleared by customs. I promise. It's okay that we're here. So
wow.
that was kind of an exciting moment. But as we leave the elevator and we go back to our car, I mentioned earlier that we gave a really good tip to the porter, and he gave us what he considered to be a special parking spot. This is where it came in handy, because between us and the gate to leave, there was only 3 other cars. So we threw the luggage in, got in the car, and from the time that we left the garage to get on the interstate, it was like 5 minutes.
Nice.
So that really came in handy.
Looking back on this cruise here, the money you paid, do you feel like it was worth the value?
Absolutely. I had a couple of complaints about, some of our fellow guests, that not the ones that were in our group, but just overall, we experienced some things that we had not seen before, and hope that we don't see again on the Carnival cruise. But again, it was a short one. It was a cheap one. So we kind of knew going in. But for us, it was worth every penny. Money well spent on this.
Any first-time tips to offer someone sailing Carnival Valor? Yeah,
the ship is absolutely gorgeous. They've done a wonderful job of keeping it in good shape. And this is a kind of a no-brainer on this one. Take care of it, right? I see so many people that go around try to trash these ships and just really are rough on them. Take care of it, because this ship has been well taken care of. It's great, but choose the early boarding time. We enjoyed that. It keeps us from having to wait in all those crazy lines. And then, some people, especially on this sailing, now if the Valor ever goes somewhere else, this tip really won't apply. But if you're sailing out of New Orleans, just park in the garage. It is not that much more. I think we paid $25 because they charge you based on the number of nights. Like Carnival says 4-day or 4-night or whatever, they charge you based on that. So for us to park, it was $100. It was covered. It was secure. It was right there. And if you've ever done the pickup or drop off at New Orleans, it is absolute madness. Like I thought Galveston was bad. New Orleans is madness because there's not enough room there for everybody. So all the people that were being picked up and dropped off, we talked to another couple from the town next to us, and a couple weeks after the cruise, and they said they waited an hour and a half for their Uber to get to them.
Looking back here, what was the biggest highlight of this cruise?
I'm thinking specifically of 2 things. The entertainment was great, but if you've never been to the Love and Marriage show, you have got to go. And it may not be this great on all of them, but our cruise director, Lizzie, she was wonderful. She found these people. Of course, they have the couple that's newlywed, the couple that's kind of middle, and then they had this other couple that had been married for 55 years.
Wow.
And this was another part where we were just keeling over laughing. At the end of the show, they went up and they asked the husband, who's sitting back to back with his wife, they said, sir, can you tell us what is your secret? What is your success to 55 years of marriage? And without skipping the beat, he said, I don't know, ask her. And then highlight number 2, there was just this one evening where we had done dinner and we really had no excuse to go to bed early. So my wife and I were just hanging out in the lobby, just enjoying each other's company. And it's something that we don't get to do very often. Mm-hmm. And just sitting there, getting to visit with each other with absolutely no responsibilities. It might sound silly, but that was the highlight of the cruise.
Well, it sounds like y'all had a good time. So in closing here, your final thoughts of Carnival Valor.
Again, beautiful ship. I think we're going to have to explore a little more on the Conquest class because even though we do enjoy the Dream class, this is kind of a sweet little ship. And I do understand that this one is going in for dry dock. And I hope that when it comes out that people will appreciate all of the updates that they do to it. But we enjoyed it, a whole lot.
All right. I've been talking with Eric about his quick cruise on Carnival Valor out of New Orleans. Eric, my friend, thank you again for stopping by. We sure appreciate you.
My pleasure, Doug. Always a pleasure to be on here.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,